Good afternoon. I am Trinace Riggs, School Board Chair, and the administrative, informal, and workshop session of this meeting of the School Board of the City of Virginia Beach, Virginia is hereby convened at 4:00 p.m. on this 28th day of February 2023. Members of the public will be able to observe the school board meeting through live streaming on schoolboard.vbschools.com/meeting/live, broadcast on VBTV and Channel 47 and on Zoom. Thank you to those that have joined us in person and online. Madam Clerk, will you please announce those school board members in attendance?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Present in the Holland Road Annex Einstein Lab are Chair Riggs, Vice Chair Weems, Ms. Anderson, Mr. Callen, Mr. Culpepper, Ms. Franklin, Ms. Martin, Ms. Melnick, and Ms. Owens.
Okay, and I know that Miss Kathleen Brown is stuck in traffic. She had to get her daughter in from preschool, and she hasn't been able to get back yet. And I know that Mrs. Manning is stuck in traffic as well. Okay? We're going to start with the school board administrative matters and reports. Do any school board members have anything to share? Let me start out with, I want to thank Miss Amber Hester, our new Fine Arts Director, for giving us all these gifts and making sure that we got that all of the school board members were recognized in such a great way by our students and our teachers with all of the things that they made us, the art projects, pictures, jewelry, necklaces, just beautiful things that they gave us. And this is in recognition of the VSBA's School Board Appreciation Month, which is this month. And we want to thank you. We so appreciate you guys recognizing us in such a special way. And it's always wonderful to see our students work and get things from them. So thank you very much. Is there any other? Okay, Miss Anderson.
I just want to say I attended the AVID, I guess it was called a workshop, last week at Great Neck Middle. And just a shout out, I was so impressed with all the things that are being done for our students. And AVID is one of those schools that, I mean, you go there and you see what's going on and what's happening with how they teach and the techniques that they use and the things that they're doing due to the AVID program. It's definitely something that is a jewel in our city. So I just want to say a shout out to Great Neck Middle for that, and thank you for to them for inviting me there for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. So we're going to move on to our behavior response and support presentation by Matthew Delaney, our Chief of Schools.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Riggs, Vice Chair Weems, Dr. Spence, members of the board. We're here this afternoon to provide the board and community with information pertaining to the safety and security of our schools. Joining me in this presentation is Mr. Tommy DiMartini, Director of Office of Security and Emergency Management. We'll be providing a broad overview while leaving time at the end for questions from the board. Several individuals are present to assist with those questions, including Dr. Ronnie Myers-Dobb, Executive Director of Programs for Exceptional Children, Mr. Robert Jamison, Executive Director of Student Support Services, and Mr. Mike McGee, Director of Student Leadership. Virginia Beach City Public Schools has remained committed to creating the conditions necessary for students and staff to learn and work in a safe and orderly environment by continually strengthening school safety and security measures, proactively addressing student behavior in partnerships with parents, consistently applying discipline guidelines, and providing additional supports for students and staff. And that's really the framework of this presentation today. This commitment is really evident in our strategic plan, Compass to 2025, which was adopted in 2019. I share that date with you because 2019 obviously was pre-COVID, and the desire to address behaviors was ongoing in that time frame as well. So this has been, this focus on behavioral supports is clearly outlined in every goal, whether it pertains to educational excellence, student well-being, student ownership of learning, an exemplary workforce, or mutually supportive partnerships, as well as Goal 6 organizational effectiveness. There's always been an emphasis placed on supporting both our students and staff. Furthermore, the equity plan, which was unanimously adopted by the board this year, is also committed to addressing discipline disparities by investigating and implementing best practices and seeking innovative solutions. So as I said, the need to address the behavioral needs and mental health needs of our students and staff is not new. However, the needs for both of these groups has increased post-pandemic. Truly believe as a result of this commitment, survey results that were included in our navigational markers from 2021 and 21-22 indicate that more than 90% of our students, staff, and parents responded that their school was a safe place. I share the statistic not as a celebration, but more of an indication of the intentional focus of our staff, students, and community at large. Maintaining a safe and educational environment requires a shared commitment from the entire community. Also know that we are not satisfied until this number is 100%. As we understand the impact of safety and security on the ability for a student to learn and a teacher to teach. I want to say that again. We completely understand the impact of safety and security on the ability for our students to learn and a teacher to teach. The CTI scores that you saw earlier today, our AP scores or SOL scores, cannot maintain a high standard without a safe and secure facility. As we've shared several times, and Dr. Spence recently shared with several media outlets, there's much work to do in the area of supporting the behavioral and mental health needs of our entire community. At this time, I'll turn the presentation over to Mr. DeMartini, who will share information on how we continue to implement safety and security measures to ensure the school division is prepared to prevent and respond to all emergencies.
Welcome,
you.
Mr. DeMartini.
Thank you, Mr. Delaney, and good afternoon. As a reminder, the Office of Security and Emergency Management continues to be guided by the 2018 Blue Ribbon Panel recommendations. The following is a broad overview of the work our office has done over the past 5 years. And although you will see several items listed on each slide as a reference to all the work that we've been doing, in the interest of time, I'm going to highlight some of the more influential items. Infrastructure improvements and projects, policy and procedure strategies and initiatives, the annual training we provide to our staff. I'll also lay out some of our new projects coming our way, along with the evolution and growth of our office. We continue to evaluate, purchase, and install access control systems to provide for the most safe and efficient ingress and egress of our schools and our auxiliary buildings. Our 3 coordinators remain in close contact with the administrators and security personnel of their assigned schools to ensure the most comprehensive coverage of our security camera systems, and we consistently are seeking to improve upon our surveillance capabilities. The newly implemented Raptor emergency management module has streamlined our ability to conduct and document mandated and non-mandated emergency drills, along with its reunification capabilities, and this is another step forward in optimal emergency preparedness. As you can see, there's several other items listed on the slide that we have done to improve infrastructure. The facilitation of our Armed Security Officer program came together relatively seamlessly. A collaborative and concerted effort with the Virginia Beach Police Department, Human Resources, and our office allowed for the program to be implemented efficiently. We continue to certify qualifying candidates and place them as attrition allows for it. Our office physically audits the security policies, practices, and measures by way of a comprehensive system where 3 or more of our members of our team attend each and every audit. In our annual training provided to administrators and security staff, we cover several topics of priority identified by my office, as well as feedback recovered from administrators and staff throughout the year. It goes without saying that proper procedures are essential when dealing with searches associated with students. We conducted a class this past summer to teach best practices as they relate to the BBCPS searches of students and to ensure that proper protocols are met, meeting the division, state, city, and constitutional expectations. Other trainings provided by our office are state-mandated threat assessment, emergency evacuation, active shooter for all of our school security officers, along with enhanced firearm qualifications that require our office to ensure a higher level of operational readiness and knowledge of safety practices. Our office teaches and facilitates these training mandates in collaboration with the Virginia Beach Police Department. And our staff also procures uniforms and necessary resources directly related to our school security officers and our our security assistants. Shown here is a timeline of the growth of our office. Here is the evolution of our office, and we base the evolution on an assessment and the necessity needed to provide the most experienced and comprehensive school security staff in the state. As you can see, 2019, we added a coordinator's position, which moved us to 3 coordinators. I mentioned earlier that we divide the school system into a third. Each coordinator is responsible for a third of the schools. We divide that up geographically in addition to auxiliary buildings as well. We believe that gives the administrators a direct communication with our staff. 2019, we hired a new project manager. Our project manager is directly related to procuring our grant funding. We received over $1 million this year in grant funding for that position. We recently hired a new emergency management position. We're excited about our emergency manager. We sent him today to the EOC for some items that were happening citywide. And then we have now instituted a second security assistant at elementary schools. We're excited to get all elementary schools up to 2 security assistants in the near future. Okay. As you may know, the name of our office changed from the Office of Safe Schools to the Office of Security and Emergency Management. This change was made to ensure a clear understanding of the responsibility of our office. It is our hope that this change facilitates our even more efficient communication with staff, administration, parents, and anyone that may have a need to discuss or report security or emergency-related issues. Our 3 coordinators, as I said earlier, are divided up into 3 sections of the city, which provides for better communication. We're finalizing the procurement of the RAVE mass notification system, which was purchased via grant funding, as I mentioned earlier. And while it is still a work in progress, this system will allow for more real-time communication via cell phone or computer and would communicate the occurrence of an emergency to those who need to know. We have previously discussed our school security officer program in depth. I'm happy to report that we have 17 armed security officers working in our schools who supplement our school resource officers. The feedback from our community has been nothing but positive, and we look forward to expanding the program as attrition allows for it. Our Office of Security and Emergency Management intranet site was overhauled not too long ago and provides a much more intuitive and user-friendly resource base. Of note, we created hot buttons that allow for more expedient access to our emergency response and our individual school crisis response plans. And we continue to communicate the location of these resources as we teach leadership and others in critical incident response and management. And lastly, we will continue to evolve our audit processes as we research and implement best practices across the division. Our staff works well with the schools in determining how best to mitigate the chance that our schools would become targets of ill intent, be vulnerable to crime, and to ensure the operational readiness of each to respond to emergencies and manage critical incidents. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Delaney.
Thank you, Mr. DeMartini. Creating and maintaining highly effective learning environments is a collaborative effort It requires the commitment from parents, legal guardians, students, and VBCPS staff. On the screen here, you see the Behavior Supports and Code of Student Conduct, which outlines the rights and responsibilities for all stakeholders in order to support the expectations and requirements of the school division. Virginia Code states that each parent or guardian of a student enrolled in a public school has a duty to assist the school in enforcing the standards of student conduct and compulsory school attendance in order that education may be conducted in an atmosphere free of disruption and threat to persons or property and supportive of individual rights. The code requires that this information is distributed to parents and that the parent and student shall sign and return acknowledgement of receipt. We give this to all parents at the beginning of the school year. Beyond the code of conduct, this document also provides important information on additional behavioral supports, such as suicide prevention, health services, home language resources, Virginia Beach community resources, and policies and procedures. For any parents or guardians that are watching this presentation, this is an extremely valuable document that I recommend you review when you have questions, and I'd also ask the board to continually reinforce this document with community members as they ask questions and are in need of resources. We also strive to create environments conducive to learning through the consistent application of discipline guidelines governed by local, state, and federal requirements. Really, a goal of this portion of the presentation is to discuss these layers and the nuances addressing student behaviors while also supporting staff. It is important to note that our disciplinary practices are focused both on the consequences of behavior as well as restoration. We have an obligation to ensure that our students develop the social-emotional skills to thrive as future-ready learners and citizens. This slide outlines the various federal, state, and local guidelines that provide direction on the application of disciplinary practices. Disciplinary guidelines are outlined by the federal government through Individuals with Disabilities Act, or IDEA, and the administrative guidelines for governing the implementation of Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And as you may recall from our last meeting, schools also must follow the Title IX guidelines. From the standpoint of Virginia, we have regulations governing special education programs for children with disabilities, and we also must follow the Student Behavior and Administrative Response Requirements, also known as SBAR. Shifting to the local level, VBCPS has specific policies that influence our disciplinary guidelines, and these must be aligned to federal and state requirements. So I just want to take a moment to take a deeper look at these, starting with the federal guidelines, particularly as it relates to students with disabilities. The Office for Civil Rights and Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services released new guidance in July of 2022 to help public elementary and secondary schools fulfill their responsibilities to meet the needs of students with disabilities and avoid the discriminatory use of student discipline. The guidance focuses on schools' obligations to meet the needs of students with disability-based behavior. I want to say that language again, disability-based behavior. And the steps schools must take to avoid discrimination on the basis of disability when disciplining students. It emphasizes using proactive approaches that provide individualized instruction and services to reduce the use of exclusionary discipline practices, and collaborating with families to effectively design, implement, and evaluate IEPs and behavioral intervention plans, also known as BIPs. I'd like to reinforce the statement on collaborating with families, as the partnership between the school and the parent or guardians is crucial in making supportive decisions for the students. Virginia is also a consent state, which requires parents to consent to changes to their child's IEP. School Board Policy 5-21.3 and the regulations governing special education programs for children with disabilities in Virginia require IEP teams to take a proactive approach to student behavior. IEP teams must consider goals, services, and accommodations to support the student. IEP teams should also consider conducting a functional behavioral assessment to determine the function of the student's behavior and determine if additional support is needed through the implementation of a behavioral intervention plan. When a student with disabilities behavior results in a recommendation for long-term suspension or expulsion, or if a student receives a series of removals over 10 school days, a manifestation determination review must be conducted to determine if the student's behavior was caused by the student's disability or the school division's failure to implement the IEP. During the manifestation determination review, or MDR meeting, the IEP team reviews the conduct, relevant information related to the student's disability, and how it manifests in the school setting. Goals, accommodation, and services in the student's IEP, teacher observations, and relevant information provided by the parents and the student. So you can see a comprehensive review. 2 questions must be answered during this MDR process. The first question, was the conduct in question caused by the child's disability, or did the conduct in question have a direct and substantial relationship to the child's disability? It must be a direct connection between the misconduct and the disability. Secondly, was the conduct in question a direct result of the local education agency's failure to implement the IEP? If there was a failure to implement the IEP, that failure must be immediately remedied. If there was a failure to implement the IEP, there is no automatic finding of manifestation. However, the failure to implement the IEP must have directly caused the misconduct. Shifting to state guidelines, Virginia Code 22.1-277 grants school divisions the ability to suspend or expel students from attendance at school for sufficient cause. However, a student cannot be suspended for truancy. You will also note the guidelines for suspension of students in preschool through grade 3. In our elementary schools, principals will contact the Office of Student Leadership for guidance on the need to suspend beyond 3 days or to expel from attendance at school students in these grade levels. The Code of Virginia also requires school divisions to submit, school divisions statewide to submit data annually to the VDOE on events of student behavior and the administrative responses to the behavior, also known as SBAR. SBAR, which began in 2021-2022, focuses on prevention and intervention through a multi-tiered support system that allows for equitable approaches to school discipline. Just want to remind you, I gave you a date of 2021-2022 of SBAR. I gave you the change in July of 2022 from the Office of Civil Rights. So you can see often this is a very fluid environment that our administrators must work in, be trained in, and have a firm understanding in. The behavior categories listed on the slide have been developed by the state and are designed to recognize the impact of student behavior on the school environment and learning. They also encourage the awareness of a student's socio-emotional development and emphasize the importance of helping students achieve academically, as well as developing their SEL, socio-emotional learning competencies. As you know, SEL skill development is a focus in Goal 2 of our strategic plan and aligns to the behavioral support goals outlined by the state. The state outlines these connections in each of these behavior categories on the slide. For example, behaviors that impede academic progress are typically indicative of a student's lack of self-management or self-awareness. Students exhibiting behaviors related to school operations may need to develop self-management, self-awareness, or social awareness skills. Relationship behaviors really affect the whole school community, and the school climate is often a reflection of how individuals treat one another. Behaviors that present a safety concern create unsafe conditions for students and staff and visitors to the school. The underlying reasons for this type of behavior may lie in any of the social-emotional competencies, so the administrator often investigates the underlying motivation for the student's behavior. Behaviors that endanger the self or others endanger the health, safety, or welfare either of the student or others in the school community. Behaviors that rise to this level of severity are often complex. While they're indicative of poor decision-making skills, students who exhibit these behaviors may also have developmental needs and other social-emotional competencies. And then finally, persistently dangerous behaviors contribute to schools deemed as persistently dangerous by the state. As of 21-22 school year, for every incident involving a violation of the Code of Student Conduct, the state requires a 3-pronged approach to addressing the behavior. First, a behavioral intervention must be implemented and documented in Synergy. That can be as simple as parent contact, It can also be a referral to the IEP team. Sometimes it can be a behavioral contract. Secondly, an instructional support must be implemented and documented in Synergy. An instructional support example can be a placement of alternative programs such as the Renaissance Academy or in our substance abuse intervention program. And then finally, there needs to be an administrative response, which typically that discipline disposition or disciplinization that may be implemented if appropriate. As we talked about earlier, student behavior is really a nuanced conversation. As you can see by this slide, the state requires us to not only have a consequence, but be focused on intervention and on support. From a local perspective, we're committed to a proactive approach to discipline. In a school board policy 5-21, students may receive a consequence as a result of behavior set forth in the Code of Student Conduct and the disciplinary guidelines for any disturbance to the learning environment. When administering discipline to a student, administrators must pay special attention to the student's rights to due process. These procedures are outlined in School Board Policy 5-36. The discipline guidelines document provides school administrations with behavioral interventions, levels of administrative responses, SBAR behavioral categories, Synergy behavior descriptions, appeal procedures, due process procedures, student support, and administrative resources. These guidelines are reviewed and revised annually by a discipline review committee comprised of central support staff from several departments, building administrators, and school counselors to ensure alignment with current policy. A component of the three-pronged approach is the level of administrative responses. This slide summarizes the level of responses to student behavior, which shall be enforced by school personnel with students who exhibit inappropriate behavior that is in violation of school rules, school code of conduct, the Code of Student Conduct, school board policies, or local, state, or federal laws. Responses to student behavior are progressive in nature. That is, the level of response increases as the number of instances of similar inappropriate behavior increases. Principals may deviate from these established levels of responses to student behavior only if there's appropriate justification. As you can see on the slide, level 1 responses are really intended to prevent further behavioral issues while keeping students in schools. The most typical level 1 response is either a verbal reprimand or a detention. Level 2 responses are also designed to prevent further behavioral issues while attempting to keep the child in school as well, and that's where you see in-school suspension. Level 3 behaviors, dependent on the severity and chronic nature of the behavior and their safety concerns, may result in a short-term removal from school. And as I shared earlier, there's guidelines for our pre-K through grade 3 students for anything beyond 3 days. And our level 4 behaviors may require a report to the director of the Office of Student Leadership as outlined in the Code of Virginia. It does not automatically result in long-term suspension or a change of placement or expulsion. And then obviously level 5 responses are for our most serious behaviors, result in a report to the director of the Office of Student Leadership, which typically leads itself to a hearing. So just to summarize disciplinary practices as it really works on the administrative levels. Administrators receive a referral. They're expected to investigate that referral, the cause of that behavior, provide due process to the student, in many instances to the parent, and ensure a disciplinary response is aligned to policy, regulations, and/or laws. Really a key component to supporting students and staff and from a proactive nature is our commitment to attaining resources that can minimize inappropriate behavior and minimize disruptions to the educational environment. If you recall, in October, we did a comprehensive review of many of these resources when we reviewed our discipline data from last year. Quickly, I'll summarize. We currently have school counselors, student response teams, student support specialists, PBIS coaches, behavioral intervention specialists, members of the Section 504 team, and special education committees, which can all provide a level of support to teachers, students, and families. There's direct access or referral systems in place to leverage these resources, and administrators regularly engage in conversations with teachers and staff to consider the possible supports when appropriate. For example, teachers may seek direct assistance from a behavioral intervention specialist, PBIS coaches, and school counselors to assist with specific student behaviors or their classroom learning environments. When looking at programs, the BASE program is a short-term intervention for students in kindergarten through second grade who may lack educational experiences and or need additional structure to help them engage in pro-social behaviors within the general educational environment. Frankly, this is a program that we see increase desire and need for students to attend, and we're working on eventually increasing seats if possible. For secondary students in need of additional support, we have a Choices program, which is an instructional program for students who consistently demonstrate inappropriate behaviors, and it's led by our student support specialists or other trained staff. And as you know, we also have alternative opportunities such as the Renaissance Academy or the Substance Abuse Intervention Program. Also really important to note is the professional learning that we offer our staff, teachers, bus drivers, and others that really has been focused on positive supporting learning environments for our students. As a result, student-teacher relationships have been an area of focus, along with prevention and intervention through a multi-tiered support system, promoting equitable approaches to student behavior and school discipline. In addition to those supports I mentioned in the previous slide, we're really committed to distributing resources proactively and responsibly based on need. We use data from a variety of reporting mechanisms to engage in data-informed decision-making. The information listed on this slide provides an example of this commitment and illustrates the importance of collaboration between teachers, principals, and central support staff. I'd like to acknowledge the efforts of the Department of Human Resources, Department of Budget and Finance, Department of Teaching and Learning, and the Department of School Leadership, as they've all had a significant role in bringing these things to fruition. The additional resources on this slide will either be in place this spring, in the fall of 2023, or with the approval of the 23-24 budget. Existing allocations are being used to add student support specialists to our elementary schools. These individuals will provide an additional layer of support for both students and staff. Many of you may realize we have student support specialists on both the middle school and high school level. They do a wonderful job supporting our students with behavioral needs. We've found that we want to shift that opportunity as well to our elementary schools. We recently shifted OPEC instructional specialists from the secondary level to the elementary level to address the behavioral challenges that exist in our elementary schools. Have you heard often from Dr. Spence and others, we're seeing those challenges at the elementary level at a level we have not seen previously. As a result, we're shifting allocations to those ends and believe we'll have some gains as a result of that. This summer and into this spring and into the summer, we're going to be providing CPI nonviolent crisis intervention training for administrators and special education teachers that are identified by principals. Participants will learn about verbal de-escalation techniques, physical disengagement, and holding skills for managing risk behavior. We're also adding community in schools to one elementary school and one middle school, Newtown and Larkspur. Community in schools provides personnel that can take on a caseload of students in need of support. They provide access to community resources and assist with after-school activities. They're currently involved at Bayside High School, Bayside 7-8, Bayside 6, and Betty F. Williams. The 2023-24 budget includes the addition of 3 behavioral intervention specialists. I didn't put this on the slide, but it's in there, as well as a stipend for special education teacher assistants in AAF, FAF, ECSE, and STEP programs. Finally, for the 23-24 school year, we are working on shifting CSEP re-ed seats from our secondary allotment to elementary to meet the increased demand on the elementary school level. So from the supports in place for students and the resources available to staff, along with the various professional learning opportunities, our school division really has multiple structures in place to achieve our mission and goals of the strategic framework, and importantly, to provide important supports to students, families, and staff. We have a couple of important events for the community to engage in. Many of you probably heard as of last night and previously that tomorrow evening we'll be hosting the school safety seminar, school safety webinar, Elementary school families can tune in at 5:30 and secondary families at 6:30. We'll be joined by representatives from the Virginia Beach Police Department, including what I've heard is Chief Newdigate will be present as well. I did not spend a significant amount of time addressing partnerships in this presentation, as Mr. Robert Jamison will be sharing information on really some powerful partnerships that are developing to address the mental health needs of our students, families, and staff. He will be sharing this information in the school board workshop on March 14th. We ask that you share this information with your friends and families because it's a really powerful presentation and opportunities that are going to exist. Prior to taking questions from the group, we've developed a VBCPS safety and behavior message map that Regina is going to pass around to the group. Thank you to Dr. Bannicky, who helped draft this document. It really follows the flow of this presentation. Candidly, we wanted to ensure that you were paying attention to what we were saying here prior to handing that to you, much like we do our students. We know where you can drift to. So this is your opportunity to look at really 4 key message points that align a lot to that PowerPoint, but we felt it was truly important to get to a really linear document that you can see a lot of the information that was presented today. And so at this time, as I said, we had several individuals here that would be happy to answer any questions that you may have, and we're prepared to take those at this time.
Ms. Franklin?
Thank you. I want to just, hold on, no, got my. All right, so I did want to just address a couple of things, because a lot of times we will get emails from parents talking about the time frame it takes from a disciplinary action, and working through that whole situation. And then I also wanted to talk about, especially for the new school board members, because I thought when I went to the SEAC meeting, Dr. Myersdorf brought some really good points to my attention, and that is talking about the how the manifestation determination review actually works with our disciplinary hearing. So, we see in the hearing packets about, it addresses whether it's an IEP issue or, that type of thing. But I thought when I went to the SEAC meeting, it was really informative about, how that all works in terms of figuring out if it is related to the IEP. And so I don't know, I know I'm putting you on the spot, Dr. Myersdorf, but I thought that was a really good point that you had brought up at the meeting, and I wish I've written it down right now. But can you just go into how that MDR is used in conjunction with a disciplinary infraction and the process that goes through, so parents can understand that this is a really valid process, and it's not just something that is skimmed over when we're determining how the discipline, leveling is brought forth, so to speak.
We were doing an activity related to the least restrictive
Yes.
environment, and so I wish I could remember specifically how that came up, but I know one of the questions often is with parents is whether they don't agree with the discipline or they don't agree with the MDR
Yes.
decision, and there's 2 different processes related to that. So if they don't agree with the MDR decision, then it goes to an expedited due process. And I have Tanya Sotomayor here tonight. I don't know if everybody knows her. She's the Director of Compliance and Special Education Services, so that is her realm. So I brought her up if you have any questions specific to the MDR. But that was one of the things is parents don't often understand the difference between the 2.
And they're involved in the MDR, right?
Oh, the parents, yes,
Yes,
it's an
so-
IEP team
yes.
meeting, and they
So this is
are-
not just something that the division pushes down on the parent, yeah.
No, it's an emotional meeting, so sometimes I think, they're a part of that team, but because of what is being discussed, that they don't always process what's happening at that time. So it
Yeah.
really relies on the team to make sure that the parents understand what is happening. And a lot of times they want to get into where they want to talk about the actual infraction, and that's not the purpose of that meeting. The purpose is really to look at whether the conduct was related to the student's
Right.
disability or if it was a result of the LRE failing to implement the IEP. So it's just because, again, it's emotional, and what they really want to get into discuss is not, that body is not an investigative body, as Tanya always says. That's not the purpose.
Well, and I think that's really important, especially for the newer school board members, to know what process that works through to get to the disciplinary packet. It's a process that involves the parents. It's not just something that the division says, oh, it's not an IEP infraction, or it is an IEP infraction related infraction. So I just thought it was really important to address how important that MDR actually is and how much the parents are involved in that process.
And it's required.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add?
I was just going to say that, and the discipline stops if we find that it is a manifestation of the student's disability, so you don't even see those students before
Right.
you, because the discipline ends and they're able to return to school and an IEP meeting is held to determine what supports the child may need.
And I think it's also important to note that for parents who, let's just say that it involved another student, that it's not just a situation where we're just putting them back in the classroom, willy-nilly. There's a big investigation that's done to make sure that we can address concerns that other families might have. So, thank you.
Do you mind if I just follow up on that statement? And Tanya, you can tell me if I'm incorrect, but I think part of that is your second part that you talked about. The individuals or the teachers that are wondering why this student is back in their class, who's exhibited this behavior, that there is a process that goes. And we talked about in one of the slides, the 10 days of removing a student with disabilities. If you go beyond those 10 days, you're out of compliance. So quite often they have to really manage that number in saying, I cannot remove this student based on guidelines. And Tanya, you can tell me if I said that incorrectly.
No, you said it very good, yes.
I've been trained well, thank you. So there, there is that component, again, when you hear about a lack of support around student behaviors, that creates a level of concern of now this child is back and they did this behavior that was pretty significant. It warranted a manifestation determination review. So I just wanted to share that as you talked about not only the parent in the IEP meeting, it's emotional for the teacher or other students or other parents of students in those classrooms as well. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to go through that layer in this presentation. As Dr. Robertson whispered to me, it's a very confidential process. So you cannot share that out with family members that are asking questions about another student.
Right. Okay. Ms. Martin?
I had two questions and a couple of requests. So first request is, could we get a copy of a behavioral intervention plan? I'm not familiar with those. I've seen IEP and 504 before, but I've never seen one of those plans. And then could we get a copy of the functional behavior assessment, what that looks like eventually?
Yeah, we can redact a copy and give you.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. So first question, is an MDR done with a 504 to see if the medical condition affected the behavior, or is that only with an IEP?
No, it's required under section 504 as well.
Okay, okay. And then my other question, having had a student that was suspended before, the drama continues on social media. So do we make any recommendations to parents to turn off social media during suspension? Give them any input on behavioral ideas, punishments at home, anything like that?
We counsel parents often around social media, many times before the child's even in trouble. But to your question, yes, in some significant issues that come through when we meet with parents, we share with them, be prepared for social media. We recommend your child unplugs. Please ensure they don't respond to anything that's there. And you know, we find more often now is really getting people to understand their personal privacy and the importance of maintaining that in their own household on incidents that occur. That's been a challenge at times, to be careful what you release out there because it'll come back. So
Yeah.
yes, we do counsel families as part of that due process piece as well.
Okay, because, I imagine when suspension was first decided as a disciplinary method, 60s or 70s, social media didn't exist, and then the drama would stop when the student was out of the school, but now it continues into the household.
Well, and that's a great point, Ms. Martin. It really talks about the need for restoration. So I talked about the student support specialists on the high school and secondary level, but also administrators do this. We have requirements of how are you greeting the student when they return, and how are you engaging with them. You have a meeting with the parent and the child when they return. You talk about expectations. You try to ensure them, we don't want this behavior to continue, but we're excited you're back in the classroom. We try to work with teachers to ensure they don't elevate beyond what the students already had to engage in with the disciplinary practices, and try to move forward with that. It's interesting, we talk often about the importance of relationships with teachers and students and administrative staff and students, and sometimes the challenge is that relationship begins to end when bad behavior shows up. And that's really the most important time for that relationship to be enhanced. So that's part of the training we've talked about in terms of proactive student relationships and family relationships.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Owens?
Thank you. I have 3 questions. I don't know who best. I'm sure Mr. Delaney will have answers. But in terms of our base program addressing behaviors for K-2, and we know that we have RA that works with students 6th to 12th grade. Kind of what happens with our third graders who are falling within that code section about long-term suspension if they do the same behavior that we have a 6th or 7th grader do that would result in them having the supports at with a different placement at RA? You know, where do they fall? And I guess really that applies to the 3rd through 5th graders, but kind of specifically also the 3rd graders who have that other criteria regarding suspension.
I want to address your question about BASE, and because Mr. Jameson's here, and I think for the benefit of the board to hear a little bit about the BASE program could be effective.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing us to be here today. The BASE program, as Ms. Owens was just indicating, is a short-term intervention of 6 to 9 weeks for our students in grades K through 2. It's essentially a layer of support for students who maybe did not have the experiences coming into school where they learned some of those positive or pro-social behaviors. This allows them to have a separate environment where they can focus on those skills. Academics is still a focus, as you can imagine, but we're really looking at skill development through that 6 to 9 week process. It is a minimum of 6. It is not a maximum of 9. So we do have students that go beyond the 9 weeks. It is a referral process. So there are some steps that are taken initially from our student response team process where you are going to look at some classroom observations, information from teachers, information from families, and then coming back together with that additional data to make a decision as to whether or not a referral to the BASE program is appropriate. Upon that referral, there is a transition period. The student is withdrawn. They do attend Windsor Oaks Elementary School. That's where the program is housed. And they will then orient for about the first 2 days to then be in the program full-time. We then remain in contact with the homeschool. Homeschool is actually invited to come and participate. Some will participate via Zoom and have meetings with the students while they're at Windsor Oaks. Well, some will physically come by and visit with their students while at Windsor Oaks. All processes are still available to students while they're in that BASE program, and I mean that from referrals to other programs or referrals for additional supports. That does not stop. And then we have a 2-week transition process as students are meeting their goals and ready to transition back to their comprehensive school. That then includes a transition plan to the homeschool that outlines the recommended strategies as the student is being essentially reacclimated to their homeschool. And that's where we're looking to have the additional elementary student support specialists ease with that transition. But school counselors, administrators, the school psychologists, and the staff at BASE, they help with that transition process as we move forward. So that's a quick overview of the BASE program from, since I'm up here, might as well share it. 2018-19 or 2019-20, our COVID shortened year, we had 17 students who were served in the BASE program. During the 2020-2021, where we had many of our students who were remaining virtual, we had only 14 students be served. Last year, we were back up to 19. Already this year, we're at 13, and we currently have 6 in the program as we speak. And we have 3 more in waiting with that referral process.
So you hear the detailed BASE program. Now, the question you asked on the other end, Ms. Owen, that's the rub. That's the dilemma that our schools are facing, is the opportunity for our 3rd graders to 5th graders, if they're exhibiting extreme behaviors, what are the opportunities they have to intervene in an effective manner? And that is the challenge right now. We do not have an alternative school for 3rd through 5th grade. I know some school divisions are looking at that. That's a heavy, I think that would require a heavy conversation for age appropriateness. To the point of the 10 school student support specialists we're looking at, we're really hoping to utilize them in those instances with our 3rd through 5th graders. We have our school counselors that are heavily involved. We have our behavioral intervention specialists that can push into those classrooms as needed. But as you're seeing, and as Dr. Spence shared in his media interviews yesterday, the threats that are coming out of our elementary schools that are requiring a pretty significant disciplinary response. If they come to a hearing, what are the decisions that are available? Quite often is to return them back to their comprehensive school, which again requires a lot of support, not only for that student, but the other students, the families in that community, and the teachers in that community that are wondering, are they safe in that building? So that is a significant challenge, and that's one reason we've trying to flood more resources down to the elementary to support those behaviors.
Okay. That's a tough one, and I know that there's no easy answer. I guess it's going to be a continued looking at and evolving how we're going to best serve that population that kind of misses both of our two resources that we do have that seem to be helpful. There was a slide, it's 21 on mine, I don't know if that's what it is here, that has 6 blocks, and one of the blocks of things that are happening, it says shifting of re-ed seats from secondary to elementary. Is that through the CSEP program, and does that indicate that there are a limited amount of slots available for Virginia Beach students, and once we reach that amount, we don't have the service for those students?
So typically for re-ed, the way it works is we have to give them a number that they call guaranteed slots. So we pay up front for re-ed, which is different from the autism program, which we pay. They create classes based on what we end with, and then they add if needed. But re-ed, we pay 100 guaranteed slots. What we're doing is we're taking some that have been designated for secondary, which we have not used as much, and we're shifting those down to elementary. We have an ASP class and an EBICS class, which is at Windsor Woods and our wing of CSEP that has 4 re-ed classes, an ASP class and an EBICS class. We're going to relocate the ASP and EBICS class, and we're going to have re-ed, 2 additional re-ed classes at Windsor Woods. So that in doing that, we're going to have to shift some of our secondary slots down to cover those classes.
Ronnie, I'm thinking for some of our newer board members, you may want to explain a few of the differences between those classrooms.
Okay, so re-ed is typically for students with emotional disabilities that require a level of structure and support that is not able to be met in our comprehensive school setting. The ASP program is a program for students with autism. And then the EBICS program is for students with intellectual disabilities that also have challenging behaviors. So they have 3 programs. They also have TRAPE, which is, and we have some slots for students with disabilities as well as some slots for general education students. So those are the 4 programs that CSEP have, and we contract with them for the services of those programs.
And so, just for my clarification, the re-ed seats that we are shifting,
Already purchased them.
we've already purchased them, and re-ed does serve, I didn't even know that re-ed served non-secondary students. So
Oh,
that
yeah.
would be
Yes.
for our 3rd through 5th graders,
We
if
have-
needed, if
we have younger
we are
students
at the
than 3rd there.
extreme level or younger.
If they're students with disabilities.
Right, gotcha. And then my last question, let's see where I had 3 marked on here. Has to do with the behavior supports and code of student conduct. I want to start off with a compliment. It is much more reader-friendly and a lot more information now than what I've seen it in the past. Is it being distributed in a paper copy or just electronic with a link? And then are there alternative formats available in our common languages or maybe in a video format for parents who don't have that reading comprehension ability? Lately in some of our appeals, there's been some concerns about the parents' abilities as well, and we want to make sure that they're getting the information in the way that they need to receive it as well.
So to answer your questions to the best of my ability, it is provided digitally at the start of the year as part of the parent acknowledgement piece. Hard copies are provided in school counseling offices and at their home school. In terms of alternative language, I'd have to defer to Ms. Allen if that's provided, or we'll get that answer back to you in terms of that alternative piece. And I would like to credit, Mr. Jamison's office has done a great job on the behavioral supports of that document that did used to be much more of a disciplinary document. It wasn't nearly as welcoming as it is now and an access to support, so kudos to his team as well. And I just want to follow back up on your question earlier with Dr. Ronnie Myers-Dobb. those programs are the ones when we talk about the behavioral disabilities, when you start looking at those students. And so those are the ones when you look at a really high need of behavioral supports that are different than many of our other students with disabilities. And the last thing, just to go back to one of your comments around the challenge of our 3 through 5, I think importantly, it's just the challenge of our entire community. And I think we need to really work on, not only at the school level, but I think broadly as a community, the relationships we have as adults, as partners in this process in assisting our students. And candidly, as a supporter of school leaders, the amount of training and expertise required to do their job requires a level of respect in the decisions they're asked to make on a daily basis. And candidly, I will share with you, that has deteriorated greatly over the last several years. You ask our secondary principals, they're getting overwhelmed with parental appeals. They're getting every decision questioned, and that's okay. I mean, you want parents to advocate for their child, but I think it's very important. I want to note that oftentimes we need to respect the job they're tasked with doing, the guidelines they must follow, and the investigations they must do when they make those decisions. And I know they would appreciate your support in that endeavor.
Thank you. And just a quick follow-up, great responses. I'm hopeful that we'll see those alternative formats. I know that we just looked at the major increase in families that aren't speaking English as their first language, and even children that we have in our system who do speak English well doesn't necessarily mean that the adults in their home
Ms.
have the
Owens,
same.
I'm online right now and I can look at it in multiple languages. I can't tell you what all they all are, but I'm looking at the code of conduct in multiple.
Ms. Williams. Yes, thank you. Mr. Delaney, with the addition of the 3 behavioral intervention specialists, they're at the elementary level. How many do we already have?
We do have some that assist the secondary level, but predominantly they are at the elementary. I think if we add the 3, we'll be up to 29. Is that correct, Mr. Jameson? 31.
31 at what level again? Total or 31?
31 total. It'll be
Total,
31 total,
okay.
yes, ma'am. We'll have 4 allocated to the secondary level. And they're more for consultation and can be called upon to work directly with school teams as well as with students with parental approval. And then we have 19 currently allocated solely through local funds at the elementary level. And then Title I has added additional behavior intervention specialists for some of our higher need schools, which brings us to that total of currently 28. And then we'll add the 3 to be at 31.
Okay, is the goal to have 1 in each school?
It would be a tall ask from a budgetary standpoint, but to your point, we know that there's
Eventually.
additional support that's needed across the board. So yes, and we're exploring multiple options, which is where we look at the elementary student support specialist as well as the BIS. I want to be clear that a BIS is 50% of our BISs are board certified behavior analysts. We look to hire those. They must have a master's degree. So there's a high level of expertise required when it comes to a BIS. And at times, it can be challenging to find the right needs to meet what we know we need in Virginia Beach to assist our students and our families. So with that said, yes, that is a goal of ours to increase the number of BISs and eventually be at a place where it's more one-to-one so that interventions can be done with more fidelity. But one way that we're supporting that are through those support specialists who will work hand in hand with our BISs.
And so right now, I mean, how do you determine which schools get it? Do the principals like make a request?
For the BISs?
Yeah.
We have already, similar to how we have, divide up many of our resources in our school division, there is a set number of schools for each of our BISs. And so at this point, there's no more than 3 schools for any one behavior
Okay, and so
intervention
they're just
specialist.
sharing right now?
Correct,
Okay,
and they're
yeah,
sharing. So
right,
what
right.
we'd like to do is we add more,
Okay, I
decrease
got
that
it.
ratio.
Yep, I got it. All right, thank you. And I think this is from Mr. DeMartini. Okay, so we have been getting so many emails, I mean, almost daily about this principal sent out this email to the school community because of a, threat or whatever. And this was asked me last night through a text. What actually constitutes a threat to send out an alert now or whatever, and what constitutes a weapon?
I'm not going to speak to the alert now. I'll let Natalie Allen and Mr. Delaney speak to that.
Or not, or the emails, I mean, because this parent said, and I don't know if this is true or not, that of course we have to have safety, but alluded to the fact that
at one of these, a weapon was a Tinker toy that the child found at school in a class. You know, so is that a weapon? Is that, so kind of like what is a
whenever-
weapon, what is a threat?
Right,
that-
whenever
that gets
these-
the email.
Whenever these instances are brought to our attention, we bring it to the police department's attention right away. And then they determine whether or not it meets the code for what, you know, the several different threats that are out there per code. There's threats in writing, there's threats with weapon, there's assaults, there's, you know, there's
Right.
different, I could go a long list, but that's why we rely on our police partners, and
Okay.
they screen it with the Commonwealth Attorney and that kind of stuff.
Okay, so you have collaboration with the police department and they say, yes, this goes under the whatever threat, and then therefore that triggers an email out to the community?
No, the email out to the community is really a public service announcement because of the seriousness these are being taken not only at the school level, the community level, law enforcement level. To be frank, some of these years ago would not gone out as
Right,
alert nows.
right.
We're in an environment now where we just don't feel like we can take that risk and say, not inform them to have a conversation with your child. So you may not at some point be speaking with the Commonwealth's attorney or with the school board administrator, or with an administrator that's making a recommendation on discipline. If we can get you to have conversations with your student, not to make any level of threat, joke, toy, any of those instances. We've had a lot of dialogue as a central support team with Tommy's team and OSUM to say, should we continue to send these out? And right now in the current climate, it has been, let's just keep sending these out so that people have a conversation with their child. One of the main reasons for tomorrow night's webinar is to have that conversation with the police involved so they can see that partnership of how important this discussion is to have with the child at home. And frankly, and Ms. Owens, you touched on it a little bit in some of your, do all parents know what that conversation needs to look like? And are they equipped to do that? So I know Mr. Jamison's team has been working a lot on that end to provide that support and communications of how do you have a conversation with your child, not to be an 8-year-old at times. You know,
Right,
when you
right,
get it,
exactly,
when you get
yeah,
heated at recess and you say something that before, Ms. Melnick would have sternly warned you as an elementary school student not to do that. Well, now it's lending to a very comprehensive response. So our main purpose of that message is not that we're feeling like somebody's unsafe, and it's to educate the population that you need to have really good conversations with your kids. You need to monitor what they're putting in their backpack before they go to school in the morning and engage in conversations about what they're looking at on social media.
Okay.
It's
Well,
a
that-
different
yeah.
world, obviously.
Right, and that helps because I think a lot of parents are basically freaking out, like, what is going on that there's a threat every day? You know, but, yeah, I mean, that was a good example. If you said, you know, years ago, it may not have risen to that level, but because of the climate that we're in.
If
to have
something
that
were to happen
conversation.
and we did
Yeah,
not put that
yeah,
out, you'd be
yeah.
hearing from people saying, why
Oh,
weren't we
yeah,
notified?
oh, yeah.
Well, and
Okay, well,
I think too, Ms.
yeah.
Weems, the reality, there's some other realities that we also contend with, right? So like social media is a reality
Right.
we contend with. So whereas in the past, kid makes a comment on the playground, goes, and the teacher addresses it and goes home, and we call the parent and say, you need to remind your child. You know, now some kid heard that, goes home, tells their parent, all of a sudden it's on social media, that's firing around rapidly.
Yeah.
You guys are getting calls, why didn't I know about this threat at my child's school? And so we've just taken the position that the best possible approach from a transparency perspective is just to communicate out that it happened. And so if parents are asking why are they seeing more, part of it is because we want to make sure you and we don't get the question of why didn't you tell us, so we'd rather just put it out there. But we have in our processes, and I think this is important to understand, we have a threat assessment process. Each of our schools has a threat assessment team. That team has been trained to assess the level of threat when a known threat has come to the attention of the administration. And the threat assessment team's core goal is to get to an assessment of whether or not that was a substantive threat or a transient threat. Transient meaning kind of said in passing, not a lot of intention or planning behind it. We're confident this isn't a real threat to the school or to an individual. Substantive threat, there's planning, there's intention, there's the ability and the means to carry it out, and it's a threat we have to take incredibly seriously. Law enforcement tends to also kind of lean in towards trying to look at which of these are the cases. They're figuring out what they do, I would suggest. In the past, what folks may have heard when we sent something out was when we had arrived at this is a substantive threat. We are now in the position of alerting folks when we've received transient threats
Right.
as well. Because of what happens when someone goes home and says, hey, I heard on the playground, we just don't need any question about what went on. And so you'll see those notes. And then to Mr. Delaney's point, what we're hoping is, in addition to that transparency, it is a reminder, please, please talk with your children. You don't go to the airport and say, Mom, you don't come to our schools and talk about doing harm to other people or to our schools. And it's going to be taken seriously, and we're going to engage in a disciplinary process immediately, and oftentimes there's going to be a referral to law enforcement. So we just want to keep reiterating that message because we need our community's help on this issue. But it isn't that it's substantively higher the numbers of things
Right.
that are
Okay,
necessarily occurring,
yeah.
although we do think it is a bit higher now because there is quite a bit of anxiety out there with our kids and their kind of understanding of how to respond to these things. But it's also that we're gonna tell you more often than maybe we would have before because of where we are in society today.
Right, well, I appreciate that, I think that will help a lot of parents who are asking questions, and it makes sense to me. And, I look forward to the webinar tomorrow, hope tons of people sign up.
Ms. Anderson?
Thank you. Mr. Delaney, you mentioned that it might take a longer time to discuss what we need to be doing for the 3rd through 5th graders. And so I just want to suggest that maybe that might be a topic for summer retreat, since we were talking about that earlier. So if you could add that, please. The other thing is, you indicated that there are 13 in the base program now, currently, this year, and that we have 3 in waiting. Is that due to lack of a space for those 3, or?
They're just in process.
Oh, they're in the process.
In terms of, having the meetings to make sure that everyone agrees so that we can then start the orientation.
Okay, all right, thank you. And then I want to talk just a little bit about, I was a general education teacher, but often I had special ed kids that were brought to my class for different parts of the day for their least restrictive environment, part of their IEP. And occasionally, well, in most cases, they had a teacher, a special ed teacher or a special ed teacher assistant that came with the student. Occasionally, that didn't happen, but for the most part, it happened because it was part of their IEP that they had someone come with them. But I'm hearing from some general education teachers that sometimes those supports are not there. And so what I want to know is, we have to do a lot because we have to follow the guidelines for our special ed kids, and I get that. But we also have reports of the entire class having to be removed from a classroom because of a disruptive student, so that they can calm that student down, or also for the protection of the class itself. And so I want to know, how many times would that happen before special interventions may kick in? I mean, could you speak to that, please?
I'm going to just give a general answer on one end and then
Okay.
turn it over to Dr. Myers-Dobb. As a principal, and
Before you give your answer, let me remind everyone, we are at 5:09, and we have 2 major presentations left for our workshop.
Well, we might have to do
And,
it afterwards.
well, I'm just telling you, we also have a long closed session as well. So I just want to remind you guys. Thank
so
you.
quickly what I'll say, and I'll hand it to Dr. Myers-Dobb. As a principal, often when a teacher would come to me about their special education students and concerns, one of the first questions I would ask is, do you know what all of their disabilities are?
Right.
Because in many instances, they can be in a class that has nothing associated with their identified disability. And so we always want to be cautious not to generalize them all into one basket of need. And that's the reason why we have individualized educational plans for them. So that's the first advice I give to teachers is, are you aware of the disabilities that currently exist in your room? Now, you're talking of a deeper issue with aggressive behaviors and all.
I am, because I'm hearing from general education teachers who feel like maybe they're not getting the kind of support that they feel they really need for the special ed kids that are being, that are either in their class for extended amount of time, or just maybe a short period of time. And so if you'll speak to that just a little bit, because I feel like we also need to protect the kids who are not special ed as well. We need to ensure that they're having, the education that they deserve as well, so.
And it's challenging to give a general response to that question.
I know.
Like Mr. Delaney said, when you're talking about individualized education programs. But when we have students that have behaviors, obviously they should have goals and accommodations and services related to those behaviors. And it could be that the services are minimal. It could be that they only get 20 minutes a day. It could be they get more than 20 minutes. It could be that they are pulled from the general education setting and into the special education setting for a time. So there's a continuum of services and supports within the school setting. But if there is that repetitive behavior that they're seeing, that is where we have to ensure that the IEP team is going back and addressing the behaviors that are occurring and talk about whether we have the services and supports in place to support that student and the setting that they're in. And I think that's one of the things that the OCR documents mention, is that we want to make sure that we're not going straight to discipline, that we're using that special education process to address any changes in behaviors that we see. And oftentimes, it's, out of frustration, I get it, people forget, like, you need to go back to the table. Have you done that functional behavioral assessment? Are you at the point of developing that BIP? Is the BIP being implemented? Does everybody know about that BIP? So there's a lot of things that we can answer with, but it's really hard when you're talking about the individual students.
So if you're counseling a general education teacher on what to do, if they feel like they really need more support, the first thing they should do then maybe is go to the special education teacher and say, I need some more support with this student. And here is why. This is what I've documented in the classroom that this student is doing. And so would you please address this and possibly bring back the committee so that we can address these issues?
And it's important for general education teachers to be an active member of the IEP team. And
Yes.
so sometimes they're not actively involved in that meeting. So that's their opportunity to just share how that behavior is manifesting in their classroom, so the team can discuss it and talk about whether additional services, goal accommodations need to be put in place.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate that, because I just wanted to speak to that. I felt like there are a lot of general education teachers out there who feel like, okay, well, hey, I need some help here. What do I do? So thank you.
Mr. Culpepper, can we move on? I'm sorry, but we really need to have these next two presentations before we move. They're not ones we can carry on later, so thank you. I know we need to talk more about it, and we will, so thank you. So our next agenda item is the PPEA interim agreement discussion, and we have Mr. Freeman and Ms. Ingram.
Thank you. Ms. Ingram will be taking you through the presentation. So we talked a little bit earlier today at the mini retreat about CIP separate from PPEA. So this is the PPEA part of the conversation. So, and Ms. Ingram is going to walk through the details, but I think you're all likely aware that the school board in August approved moving forward with an interim agreement. The next step in that process was City Council. City Council has deferred it, and at their last meeting requested that the school board essentially reaffirm their support for the interim agreement. So that's why we're here today. We're going to talk PPEA during this period, and Ms. Ingram's going to walk you through. I'm also going to provide you a handout related to CIP that I'll mention at the end, so I please encourage you. We'll talk the PPEA first, and then we'll talk about this handout at the last part of that.
Good afternoon again. Thank you again for having me. So as Mr. Freeman discussed, we're going to be talking and focusing on the PPA agreement. This is separate than the CIP. The PPEA is a procurement option where the CIP is a funding source. So what is a PPA project? Public-private educational facilities and infrastructure project. The PPA process is an alternative method of delivering infrastructure projects than the traditional design, bid, build process we're accustomed to employing in Virginia Beach City Public Schools. Either procurement method would use funding from the CIP. However, the PPA process would require separate approval. The PPA process is governed by the Code of Virginia and has been in effect for over 20 years, since 2002. It allows the public body to create public-private partnerships through contractual agreements for a wide range of public projects. Certain efficiencies are able to be gained with this method by having the contractor involved in the beginning of the design process and having a vested financial interest in cost savings for the duration of the project. In response to the growth and use of the PPA process throughout the Commonwealth, the school division also created its own policy setting forth guidelines for the PPA process in 2017, which is School Board Policy 3-71. A number of school divisions and local governments in the Commonwealth have engaged the PPA process in renovations and replacement projects, such as the City of Norfolk in the most recent replacements of 5 schools, and the City of Virginia Beach in various projects such as the Sports Center at the Virginia Beach Oceanfront. Beginning in 2009, the Auditor of Public Accounts posts all public-private partnership agreements in their entirety for local governments within the Commonwealth, comprising over 30 projects throughout Virginia, including schools and localities. So after receiving an unsolicited bid in June of 2021, administration worked with the school board to engage in a planning of the timeline for evaluation of offers. In front of you here is that draft timeline as of January. This looked for seeking approvals and deliverables for 1, the interim agreement, 1 year of design services with public input, including defining the educational program, and 2, negotiation of a comprehensive agreement for construction services when and if the interim agreement is completed after a year of design services. With the comprehensive agreement, again, after the year of the interim agreement, has its own approval process, as you can see on the document in front of you. The initial timeline of activities was established prior to receiving conceptual proposals in February 2022, early in the process. Notated in receiving the first conceptual proposals is the goal of making evaluation determinations based on best value or low price for the respondents. So putting out the PPA RFP number 5083, the school division sought conceptual and detailed proposals and had 2 responding offerers, SB Ballard Construction Company and Heartland Jordan. Throughout the process, solicitations and non-proprietary submittals have been available online at the school division's website, vbschools.com. So the opportunity we have in front of us of entering into a PPA interim agreement for 3 replacement schools would be low risk for the school division and could have numerous benefits, including use, cost, and design. One benefit would be schools opening sooner, which does not only benefit the community with the use of new buildings, but also helps us with cost savings in relation to avoiding years of inflation. Timelines estimated in the CIP that we reviewed earlier today reflect design, bid, build timelines and do not consider the approval of the PPEA, as that is a separate process than the CIP. If PPA is approved, dates considering design, bid, build would be adjusted to an earlier timeline, opening roughly half a year earlier for Princess Anne High School in January 2028, opening roughly 4 years earlier at Betty F. Williams Bayside 6th grade campus with estimated opening of January 2027, and opening roughly 7 years earlier at Bayside High School with possible opening in July 2031 versus the December 2038 opening under a typical design bid build as proposed in the CIP. A large benefit of the PPA process is cost savings. Earlier completion of projects would avoid years of inflationary costs, saving tens of millions of dollars and possibly hundreds of millions of dollars from the updated project budget estimates. The benefit of the contractor and design team working together in unison to save on project costs as design, construction, and construction management proceed. and the benefit of understanding a guaranteed maximum price to be negotiated along with a comprehensive agreement for 7 years of construction would also lead to cost savings. In addition, the future savings for future high schools, that Bayside High School plans could be used as a prototype for the next several high schools, including First Colonial, Kempsville, and Green Run High School. Not starting design at step 0 for these schools would be highly advantageous in terms of their cost and need of replacement. The next step in the process, needing action from City Council, currently deferred to April 18th, would be the interim agreement process itself, as another benefit to the PPA process. Nothing would be lost during the years-long process of design. VBCPS would keep the plans and support documents, whether we would continue to a comprehensive agreement or not. Schools and city staff can continue to work together to understand the pros and cons of procuring these 3 schools under a pre-PA process along the duration of the interim agreement work. With all funds appropriated for the $15.4 million interim agreement, work would be able to begin with the offerer right away if approved, with work on educational specifications, which would define the program being the first step, and then beginning of design charrettes with the community, leading to 30% designs. We would also have the added benefit of a general contractor working in tandem with professional educational planners and architects and engineers to help evaluate the program and design with a financial saving themselves for cost savings. So the PPA interim agreement estimated to last the 1 year for design service is very important to the process as we just looked at. It will help inform the complete PPA process, including the cost and timeline for next steps, construction under the comprehensive agreement estimated to last 7 years. Questions that need to be informed by taking this next step in the PPA interim agreement are, what would a final guaranteed maximum price be? Being that the bid date for these 3 projects would be next year rather than 2 to 8 years from now, will the GMP be closer to the PPA RFP advertised budget of $428 million, or will it be as high as a projected budget of $714 million proposed under the CIP? What will the impacted debt service be? School staff will continue to work with city staff and consultants such as Davenport to help understand any pros and cons of a proposed PPA comprehensive agreement. We'll be able, as this graph shows you, to understand any increase or changes in funding sources while understanding any possible timelines for project delivery. Does delivering the projects go faster than the funding sources we're getting? We'll be able to have those discussions during the interim agreement. We can work with the offerer on that schedule in order to not exceed funding availability and in order to not negatively impact debt service. What will the program for the schools be? How large does the school and components of the schools need to be, such as classrooms, resource rooms, and admin space, and what educational programs will be included? That would be all part of the conversation during the interim agreement. So again, during the interim agreement's year-long time of design services, VBCPS will also be able to communicate with the community, letting them know that timelines may vary depending on a variety of factors. The school division has already gone out to the community earlier this fall when reaching out to tri-campus families to understand the best delivery model for Williams Bayside 6th. We were clear in talking to the community about general factors that might lead to different timelines. We will continue to have these discussions with the 3 schools, trying to understand the need of the school community, such as the level of career and technical education at high schools, or at the elementary school, middle school shared campus, what those logistics might be. As a reminder, entering into a PPA interim agreement for a year of design services, again, action pending council April 18th, and also for consideration of the school board tonight, does not guarantee approval of the next step of the process, which would be seeking approvals for construction through a comprehensive agreement. After an understanding of what's in the job and how much will it cost and what is the timeline to get it done, will staff be able to understand if continuing the PPA process into the construction for the comprehensive agreement would be advantageous to the community or not. The result of the interim agreement work will help inform if the PPA process should continue past this interim agreement. So again, as advertised, the PPA RFP number 5083 for replacement of 3 schools includes Princess Anne High School, Williams Bayside 6th, and Bayside High School replacement schools. At a possible for 1 year of design services to help understand and negotiate a guaranteed maximum price for construction. This next step is important in understanding the opportunity for savings that could be in front of us. Entering into the interim agreement is low risk to the city and schools, as all deliverables would remain the property of the school division to continue design processes as necessary should a PPA comprehensive agreement not be entered into. The interim agreement is proposed with a not-to-exceed price of $15.4 million and has additional dedicated funding of $500,000 from SB Ballard Construction Company as part of their proposal. School Board approved the PPA interim agreement on August 9th, 2022. And again, we'll be looking at it again under action today and defer to City Council for April 18th. So here's just a little look at the timeline in front of you, shows a recap in relation to the PPA process. So where have we been? In June 2021, we received the unsolicited proposal for these 3 replacement schools. In August 2021, the school board authorized the superintendent to accept the unsolicited proposal. Per the PPA guidelines, the public solicitation for competing bids was advertised in October 2021. PPA requests for conceptual proposals. In December 2021, we received 2 offers, one from SB Ballard Construction Company as well as one from Heartland Jordan, both of which were accepted per the RFP criteria. Per the PPA guidelines, the school division then posted the PPA request for detailed phase proposals in February 2022, with both offers again submitting detailed phase proposals in March 2022. In April, the PPA Review Committee received presentations from both offerers and shortlisted SB Ballard Construction Company in order to begin negotiating the interim agreement. The proposed interim agreement is currently posted publicly online along with other components of the PPA process we've discussed per the PPEA guidelines. On April 26th, school board workshop was held to discuss the process and next steps. On June 28th, school board public hearing and information sessions were held for the public. And on June 28th, on July 5th, City Council received information related to this process as well. So here are the steps of the approval process and what's next. As you can see, on August 9th, 2022, school board took action on the interim agreement, which was approved. We were asked for an additional brief from City Council on August 16th, and we had several deferrals leading us to the latest deferral on April 18th, 2023, when City Council will next take up for action the interim agreement. If approvals are granted for the interim agreement by both the school board and City Council, VBCPS project management team will work with SB Ballard Construction Company to plan, schedule, and host design charrettes and other stakeholders meetings. As we discussed earlier, educational specifications would be the first step, which would define the program for each of these schools. Those would be followed by conceptual plans, building and site options, schematic designs, and then 30% design and engineering documents will be delivered to VBCPS from our PPA partner, SB Ballard Construction Company, in roughly late spring, March 2024. Through this process, staff will be able to negotiate a final comprehensive agreement for a final guaranteed maximum price, and that would conclude the interim agreement deliverables. The team would then review deliverables and seek approvals from both school board and City Council to move forward with a comprehensive agreement or not. If these approvals for a comprehensive agreement are obtained, notice to proceed for construction services would begin. So again, in front of you here is the resolution adopted by school board on August 9th, 2022. Again, this is under consideration today as an action item. In closing, there are substantial benefits to continuing the PPA process for the school division and the community of Virginia Beach. The proposed interim agreement for $15.4 million will allow design of the school projects to begin, including programming for size and curriculum needs, and a better understanding of the actual costs that would avoid years of inflationary costs by possibly bidding earlier than the traditional design bid build method. We would work with design professionals and the general contractor who would work together and both be invested in the project at their own risk in order to realize the most cost-effective and educationally effective method in delivering the new school buildings. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, let's do a time check with you guys. It is, look at the time.
I tried to be quick.
No, you did a good job, thank you. So, we've had a long time, excuse me?
What was the question?
Can we have them come back?
Well, yes, we can have discussion during the action item.
Tonight, at the dais?
We can ask during that time?
Yes, yes, so during that time, you can ask questions, okay?
Okay, well, thank you for your time again, and I look forward to speaking with you about it further today.
Okay, we are finished with the workshop at 5:32. We're now going to the recess portion of our agenda, and we will be back on the